Let's look at bash for loop on the command prompt and a quick example of where this is useful. We use the for loop to iterate over a sequence of items. Here the sequence is 1, 2 and 3 and space is the delimiter between those items. And for each item in that sequence we get the variable into the variable item. It can be any variable name and the body of the for loop is specified between keywords do and done. We are just displaying the value within the variable item using $item, and we get those values. That's a simple example. We can also use curly brackets to generate sequence of items with prefixes and suffixes. So if we were to replace the sequence with curly brackets like this, we get the same output. The advantage here is this allows us to have a prefix for each of those items, and we get that prefix attached to every item before it goes into the for loop. Now let's say that these were file names and we want to do some operation on those files. We get those file names generated quickly on the command prompt. There are other techniques to do the same, but this is an example for demonstrating for loops. Let's say that we have a list of IPs. So instead of just file names, we want to do some operation or run a command on a set of IPs, and we know the prefix for those IPs. So the prefix for the IP is 192.168.56. and the host numbers are 10 and 11 within the curly brackets. So we would get those IPs. Now these IPs correspond to the two virtual machines that we have on the left. Let's say that we want to quickly run some command on these virtual machines. We can use the for loop for that, especially when there is a sequence to the IPs and they have a common prefix. We can display the IPs and SSH into those machines. SSH has already been configured. We will look at that later. And let's say that we want to run the command uptime on each of these hosts. If we do that, for loop will go through each of those IPs, put together. We display the IP and we SSH and run the command uptime on each of these hosts. Now this is useful. The curly brackets are useful when we can somehow stitch together a sequence of items with prefix and suffix. If those IPs were in different networks or there is no sequence to them, let's say that they were on a file called ips.txt, we can still use the for loop to get the work done. Instead of mentioning the IPs using the curly brackets, we can do a cat on that file. This syntax means execute the command within the single quotes first and then pass it to the for loop. So if we were to do this, we get the same output. Now that's an example where we can use the for loop. Let's say that we want to shut down these machines. We can do that also. It can be any command that we do. For example, if you have development virtual machines running or any other system that you want to work with, if you were to execute this command, the virtual machines would shut down on their own. So that's an example of using bash for loops quickly on the command line to get some work done.